Hello and welcome to Bud Explains, where I take a subject, be that rules, history or concept, from the role-playing world and try to explain it to you in a way that I hope helps you understand how it works. Today's explanation is bonds from Delta Green the role-playing game. In Delta Green the role-playing game, bonds represent an agent's relationship with the characters that are important in their life. That can be family, close friends, therapists, support groups, or even beloved pets, whatever you feel is a fair representation of this. As a mechanic, bonds are there to protect your agent against SAN loss or to suppress the effects of any disorders or temporary bouts of insanity that they may have accumulated in their battle against the unnatural, though they are not to be simply viewed in this way. They are their precious connection to humanity. Those agents who isolate themselves by having no bonds are more likely to suffer from psychological trauma than those who have loved ones waiting for them back home. An agent's profession determines the amount of bonds they have, with more testing and time-consuming professions offering fewer bonds to maintain, and each bond begins with a score equal to the charisma score of the agent. These bonds often erode over time as the agent's involvement with the horrors of Delta Green deepen, though bonds can be restored if they are nourished in between missions. It is worth mentioning that they can never go higher than the agent's charisma score. In addition to this, if an agent's charisma score drops for any reason, each bond drops by the same amount, even for groups, as it drops for each person in that group. Bonds with individual people have a vulnerability in that if they ever die or go insane, that bond is permanently destroyed, whereas if it is with a group of people, every person in that group needs to die or go insane in order for it to be ruined. A bond is also permanently destroyed if it drops to zero. As bonds deteriorate, the relationship becomes more and more strained in a way determined by the player and the handler, and will most often fall apart due to events beyond the control of the agent. If something happens to the subject of a bond, for example, a member of the agent's team is killed, then the bond is reduced by D4. If that takes it to zero, it is beyond repair and gone forever. The agent's handbook stresses that a bond destroyed in this way should not be erased, but crossed out, left on the character sheet as a reminder of something that went very wrong. There's another type of bond that can form, that between fellow Delta Green agents. Every time a member of their team suffers some kind of unbelievable trauma, such as one of them dying or going temporarily insane, the agent needs to make a SAN check. A pass means that everything is fine, or at least as fine as it can get in Delta Green. A failure means the agent gains a bond with the other Delta Green agents present at half of their charisma score, or increases a pre-existing Delta Green bond by D4. A new Delta Green bond also subtracts D4 from a non-Delta Green bond of the agent's choice, and if the agent already has a Delta Green bond, then a non-Delta Green bond is reduced by 1. Bonds also have other uses. If an agent loses SAN at any point, they can use their willpower score to mitigate the loss. The amount of willpower lost is always D4, and when this is done, a bond is also reduced by the same amount, and it is projected onto the bond the next time the agent interacts with them. And it is a way of representing taking stress out on something unrelated to what originally caused the stress. This can be explained in many ways. For example, they could become hostile and angry, irrationally blaming their loved ones for a trauma that they had no part in, or perhaps they become more distant and less eager to engage, causing distance between the agent and their bonds. This is something that's to be worked out with the handler and the agent. In addition to this, bonds can help an agent repress insanity by pulling hidden reserves of strength from the things in life that give it meaning. This can be used to remain in control of the blind panic of a temporary disorder or an acute psychotic episode by spending willpower rolling D4 and lowering it by that amount. If they have at least 1 willpower left at the end of it, they need to describe how the bond could help them keep it together, and then they reduce the bond by the amount rolled on D4. After this, they make a SAN check. Success means that they repress the insanity and can act normally. A failure means that the willpower is lost and the agent has failed to remain in control. It's worth pointing out that it's not all doom and gloom for bonds. They can be improved in between missions during the home sequence. Should the agent go on to fulfill their day-to-day duties and describe something that they are doing in work or at home to do this, then they can roll a SAN check. If they succeed, they improve a non-Delta Green bond by D6 up to a maximum of the agent's charisma score. A critical success also adds 1 SAN point up to their maximum of power times 5, as they manage to get a grip on life and normality. A fumble is disastrous and reduces the bond by D4 and the SAN by 1. The improvement or worsening of the relationship should, of course, be described by the player. Agents who are going to therapy can also form bonds with their therapist. If the therapist manages to cure a disorder completely, then the agent gains the therapist as a bond at half their charisma score but loses D4 from other bonds. Those agents who start intensely studying or training to boost a skill or stat reduces a non-Delta Green bond by 1 due to lapsed responsibility. Similarly, those agents that are so invested in a case that they spend their free time poring over evidence reduces a non-Delta Green bond by 1. Should the result of working for Delta Green mean that the agent is fired from their job, they need to make a charisma test for each and every bond or lose D4 from them, with a test at a minus 20% penalty if the bond is a colleague from that job. If the worst happens and an agent faces prosecution, they must similarly make a charisma test for every bond or lose D4 from each one. Actual prosecution drops each bond by D6 in a similar fashion. Bonds can also be used to call in favours. If the bond is someone in a position to help the agent, they make a charisma times 5 roll to see if they can persuade them. Failure can result in bonds being dropped by 1, D4 or D6 depending on how expensive or far-reaching the request is, and additionally, an agent spending large amounts of money for Delta Green equipment can reduce bonds, though in times 5 or accounting skill rolls can mitigate the damage to bonds. By the same measure, raising or squandering illegal cash can adversely affect your bonds in a similar fashion. So in summary, bonds are a connection to humanity that an agent has and is a precious, fragile commodity that needs to be nurtured in order to be kept, and they can protect you from the horrors that man was not meant to know. But that protection, like all things of this nature, comes at a cost. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and share it, and make sure to subscribe for more Bud Explains videos in the future. Bud out.